Hello, my name is Sandy Fifecode, and I will be your host. In this video, we'll be discussing social-emotional learning and how modeling positive behavior can really help children succeed in school and in life. We're very excited today because joining us in this discussion is the award-winning author, Stuart J. Murphy. Stuart, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Sandy. I'm looking forward to this interview.
Yeah, it'll be great. All right, let's get started with some introductory questions. Let's start, first of all, with some definitions. Let's start with visual learning. What is visual learning exactly, and what are some of the skills and strategies for teaching students in this way?
Visual learning is all about how we acquire and communicate information through various visual stimuli, like pictures and diagrams and icons and charts and all kinds of ways of communicating information that aren't reliant on words and numbers. And the important thing about visual learning is that our children are all visual learners. They've been visual learners since the moment they were born. And when working with pre-K children, visual learning is especially important because children are just beginning to acquire language and just becoming readers, but they're efficient and practiced visual learners. And so when I define visual learning, I like to have a common definition of it, and when I talk to people about it to make sure that we're all talking about the same thing. So I think it's notable that I said acquire and communicate information visually. The acquiring is the taking in, and the communicating is the giving out. So taking in information that's provided to us visually, and then taking it out, passing it out, giving it to others, and communicating with others. And these are very important skills for young children to have. I typically break it down into 5 broad skill areas that I think are important to focus on. The first one is observation. We want our kids to be good observers. We want them to look and then really see. It's kind of the same thing as, you listened, but did you hear what was said? You looked, but did you really see it? What were the attributes of what you saw? Did that person act correctly? Did you see how they were acting? Is that a triangle? Does it have 3 corners and 3 sides? And so observation is the first of the visual learning skills. The second is recognizing what you saw, recall, recognition, remembering what you saw and then being able to use it again. Oh, yes, that's an A. I know what that sounds like. That's an F or a PH, and it sounds like an F, and I have seen that before. I know what it means. That's a rectangle, and I understand what a rectangle is. And so recall what you have observed and being able to recognize it again. After recognition, I think perception is the most important thing to consider, what it means. What does that stop sign mean? Where's the exit sign? How can I get out of this building if I need to? Where do I enter this building? Where's the men's room or the ladies' room? All of the kinds of things that we use signage and icons and symbols for, and being able to have the perception to understand the meaning of those symbols that are given to us, those visual communications. And then once we have that, we can go on to interpretation and interpreting what we saw, extending the information. I looked at that bar graph, and I saw how many cups of lemonade they sold on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and I know they sold more on Wednesday because the bar was higher, having that kind of interpretation of data that is presented to us visually. I saw that timeline of how many hours it took to get to school or to go somewhere, and I was able to look at that timeline and interpret the fact that it took 3 hours to do that. I understood that extended time and what took place. And then finally, the 5th skill associated with visual learning is self-expression, being able to express yourself visually, sketching and drawing and making visual symbols yourself so that other people can understand the information that you know. So those skills, observation, recognition, perception, interpretation, and self-expression, are the skills that I associate with visual learning and that we want our young children to be able to acquire.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. What a great answer. And it almost feels to me as if it's a bit of a hierarchy of skills as well, which really makes it easy, I think, for our listeners to understand and see how visual learning really applies to very young children. Very great. All right, let's talk a little bit about social and emotional skills. What are those kinds of skills that you want children to acquire? And can you also give us examples of how you would model these in a classroom setting?
Well, I think the important thing about social emotional skills, and especially when we're talking about pre-K and kindergarten children, is that research has shown that the acquisition of positive social emotional skills is the greatest predeterminer of school success, and much greater a predeterminant of school success than are the academic skills of reading and writing and science skills. Because if you can't work together with other students, if you can't be part of a group, if you can't cooperate, if you can't listen, then in fact, how are you going to be a good student and work together with other students to be able to become a good learner? And we want our kids to be good learners and to be successful in school. There's been more and more research that's come out about particularly one of the emotional skills, self-regulation, one of the key emotional skills of self-regulation, and how important that is as a skill for young children, the ability to regulate your own behaviors and to know how to calm down when you need to calm down, and how to express yourself, and basically how to regulate your own behaviors and act accordingly. And so I think that it's important to note that the social skills associated with young children, making friends, being a friend, cooperating, listening, being polite, mutual respect, all those are important social skills. And important emotional skills include dealing with frustration, building your own self-confidence, being able to make choices, and very important, very critical, bullying, dealing with bullies, whether you're the bully yourself or whether someone is bullying you or whether you're a bystander to seeing bullying taking place. This is so important, and so important that we start building those skills at the very youngest levels. And so these skills indeed can be modeled for young children, and I think the modeling is extremely important because kids have to see it. They have to see it and recognize it when it's taking place. And this can be done through stories like read-alouds and stories that are shown to children, illustrations and stories so that children really see those behaviors taking place. And it can be done through role-playing in puppet shows and little plays that we have with children so that they take the role of the bully or the role of the bullied, the victim, or the role of the bystander, and are able to see and express the emotions associated with those and do it in front of other children so there's a discussion that takes place afterwards. And then I think we have to stop and think about doing, presenting ourselves in a way that shows those behaviors, and then note them every so often. That was being polite, or that was a very nice thing to do, or you helped your friend, or you shared your toys, and pointing those things out when they happen, and making sure we exemplify those ourselves. So those are some of the social and emotional skills associated with this process of helping children be successful students, and I think those are a few of the ways in which we can exhibit those in our daily classroom practice.
Awesome. And I know from my own engagement and discussion with teachers, this whole area of social emotional learning is increasing in importance across the grades, but especially with very young children. So I really applaud the work you're doing, which leads me to the next question I want to ask you. We know that our listeners are always looking for resources. So one of the resources we certainly want to talk to you about is your own series, I See, I Learn at School. Can you talk a little bit about how this series aligns with emerging standards and guidelines for early childhood education?
I was encouraged to get involved in social and emotional skills because of my background in visual learning. I've spent my entire career working in the field of visual learning, and as I pointed out earlier, our children are visual learners, and they start being visual learners at a very young age. And it has become apparent over the last decade that our children need more help in the acquisition of positive social and emotional skills. I mean, I think we can just think about that ourselves for a moment. They're continually seeing negative behaviors, and there's negative behaviors in the things that we talk about all the time, whether it's about video games or road rage or how people act to one another, or people talking over each other in TV commentaries and that sort of thing. And where are the positive behaviors for them to see and to witness and to be able to emulate? And so that thrust, that idea, caused me to get involved in a couple of seminars on on early childhood education and particularly on social emotional skills and how visual learning strategies could be effective tools to use in advancing the social and emotional skills of our young children. So when I started working on the program, I started looking at the various frameworks and ideas and concepts that were available. For example, Head Start has a wonderful framework that's called the Head Start Child Development and Early Learning Framework, and it goes through all the skills necessary for children to be successful, whether they're social and emotional skills or learning attitudes and models and things that deal with ethics and grit and the ability to move forward with persistence. And so that became a guideline for me. Many states, like Ohio, for example, have their own early standards for learning, and many cities, like Washington, D.C. and New York City, have their own standards for learning. All of these together became the basis for my information in developing I See, I Learn at School and in developing the ideas that are promoted within that series.
That's all the time we have for today. Stuart, thank you so much for all of this great information you've shared. We hope our listeners will stay tuned for our top 4 you should know facts about social emotional learning and visual learning. And we'd also love to hear from you. You can email us at whatcasts@weareteachers.com with any thoughts or feedback, and let us know if there's a topic that you'd like to see us cover in the future. Thanks again for joining us, and we hope you have a great day. Thanks.